Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Legal Careers webinar Q&A for the University of Cambridge as part of our Open Days offerings this week. I'm Zimona Hannibal. I'm the Schools Liaison Coordinator here at the Faculty of Law, and I'll be joined today by Cambridge alumni from 4 of our Widening Participation and Access partner and supporter firms, Freshfields, Clifford Chance, Hogan Lovells, and Maitland Chambers. And we'll be here to answer your questions. So if I can ask all of our panelists to turn on their videos so that we can see their lovely faces. Fantastic. It's great to see you all, and thank you for joining us and giving some of your valuable time to help answer some questions today. So I'd like to get us started with just an introduction from everybody. So if our panelists could introduce themselves, say what college they went to, maybe your matriculation year. For people watching, matriculation year is when you start at Cambridge, what your current position is now and what firm you're with.
Shall I go first? My name's Gregory Banner. I read law at Trinity Hall. I matriculated in 1985, which seems a distressingly long time ago when I say it out loud. I'm now a Queen's Counsel at Maitland Chambers doing corporate, commercial and company work.
I'll follow on from Greg. My name's Rosanna Foskett. I'm at Maitland Chambers as well with Greg. I matriculated in 2002 and I actually read classics at Trinity. And at Maitland Chambers, I specialise in similar sorts of areas to Greg, so mainly commercial disputes, company law, insolvency, and a bit of offshore work.
I can go next. So my name is Gaspare Kirillo. I matriculated in Cambridge, I think back in October 2017. I did an LLM there, and now I'm a corporate associate at Hogan Lovells.
I'm Alia. I matriculated in 2016 and I read HSPS and I specialised in politics and sociology. I like Gaspare, work at Hogan Lovells, and I'm a trainee and I'm currently in my first seat.
I can go next if that would help. I'm Michael. I matriculated in 2012 on a sunny day at Robinson College. I read English for 2 years, switched to law, did 2 years of law, then did an LLM in law, and graduated on a very rainy day. I'm an associate at Clifford Chance in the restructuring and insolvency team.
I'll go next. I'm Rachel. Hi, I matriculated in 2016. I read law at Murray Edwards College, and I'm now a trainee solicitor at Clifford Chance in my third seat.
Hi everyone, I'm Kira. I matriculated in 2016, studied law. I'm now a trainee solicitor at Freshfields, nearly a year into my training contract.
Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. And I realize I forgot to say this at the very beginning. Please submit your questions during this this time via the Q&A function. And if there's a question that you really want answered, please use the upvote function so that we know what people would like to talk about the most. So let's start with one of these questions that have come in. So we have a question that is asking us, how diverse are my career options after reading law? We'd like to take a stab at that.
I'll have a stab at that.
Perfect.
Well, when I was in my third year, I looked at management consultancy and banking, non-retail banking. And I ended up with offers from firms in both of those sectors, which ultimately I didn't pursue. For reasons that I will expand upon if anybody wants me to. But there wasn't really any difficulty in getting interest from those sorts of employer sectors with a law degree. The point about any degree, I think, is that an employer should realize that it teaches you transferable skills. A law degree makes you particularly apt for pursuing a career in law, but the transferable skills you learn doing a law degree are applicable in all range of different professions. We've had people who have come to us for pupillage, been taken on, and then decided after a couple of years they don't actually think being a barrister is the life for them. They've gone on to all sorts of different and varied careers. So it's a skill set that I think is really limited by your ambition and your desire or willingness to take risk in jumping sideways to a different type of profession.
Thanks for the insight. Does anybody else have something they'd like to add?
Yes, if I were to survey my friends who graduated law at Robinson and across the university, half of them have remained in law, and the other half have gone on to do other things in much the same way that someone who's studying history or English or a science subject can then move into law. And for example, I've got friends who are in marketing, publishing. My most exciting friend has gone on to work on yachts, which I think is fabulous, and I wish I had done that too. But yeah, I think it's totally limitless. It just depends on how you sort of market your CV, because you can pick out the skills that you want to sort of publicize to each employer you're applying to.
Also, if I can add, I think by looking at people in my intake when I was a trainee, I noticed it's very common even for people to just work for a few years after the law degree. And I think this is very good when they apply for training contract, that people that work in consultancy and banking and they apply directly for a training contract without a VAC scheme, as they already had the transfer skill that were needed. So if someone wants to work for a few years before entering the legal field, I think it's very common. Yeah.
Can I just make a quick plug? Sometimes barristers are slightly less successful at marketing themselves to students than solicitors are. And I know a lot of our colleagues on this panel are solicitors, and they do a much better job of it than we do. But if you are thinking about studying law or already kind of going down that path, do please bear in mind the bar as a possible career option. Lots of people don't think they can or don't think they should. They assume that unless you're a very confident public speaker and somebody who's sort of always willing to stand up and speak in public, I guess, they assume they can't possibly be a barrister. But there are a lot of different facets to our job. And there are a lot of skills you learn on a law degree and indeed on any number of other degrees that will make you a very good barrister. So don't forget about us. We are here and we're a great career option. So yeah, just bear that in mind.
Yeah, I guess if maybe let's build on that, because I think that's an excellent point. Is then, and particularly because I think you said, Rosanna, that you had read classics, correct? So do you want to maybe just briefly kind of talk about your journey into the law, since that is, you came from a non-law degree and then became a barrister. So maybe just to flesh out some of the options for people tuning in.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good point. I mean, I'd always sort of thought I might want to be a lawyer, and I actually did a fair bit of work experience both in solicitors' firms and at barristers' chambers. So I did vacation schemes at Hogan Lovells, Clifford Chance and Slaughter and May. I thought that might well be for me. And I did quite a few mini pupillages, which has sort of worked for people who haven't come across the term before. That's effectively short work experience placements in barristers' chambers. And I did all sorts of mini pupillages. They're much shorter than vacation schemes, usually only sort of 1-2 days, possibly a week. And I did that in all sorts of areas of law as well. From those experiences, I was able really to narrow down what bits of a particular job I would enjoy and what bits I wouldn't enjoy. And having done that exercise, I focused in on the bar just because I liked the advocacy aspect of it, and I was keen to work in disputes rather than in, for example, more transactional work, which is obviously a key part of being a corporate solicitor, or at least a key part of their general work profile, even if you become a disputes solicitor. So that's really how I got there, and I would definitely advise people to try and take as many work experience options as you can. They not only boost your CV to people who might employ you in the future, but they also really help you focus in on what it is that's going to suit you, suit your skill set, suit your personality when you come to select which job route to go down.
Thanks, Susanne. I think that leads on to a great question that we've been getting in that's got a few upticks. So we'll go to that, which is doing work experience while reading law at Cambridge recommended? So I think from what you said, the short answer, of course, is yes. But if everybody would, maybe kind of talk about their own work experiences. When do you look for these? Where should you look for vacation schemes? What are maybe other alternatives out there that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Well, I used to be I used to run the pupillage committee at Maitland for about 10 years. So I'll speak to this question from the point of view of us as a chambers looking at applicants. These days, having work experience in the shape for us of mini pupillages on your CV is pretty much an essential component, but they need to be targeted. We're not really interested. We're not put off if you've done mini pupillages across the entire breadth of the bar and you've seen criminal work, family work, all sorts. But what we're interested in is whether you have done mini pupillages that show an interest in us or our direct competitors. That is an important component now of your application. And if you've done that, we sit up and take notice. The time to do it, though, is a bit trickier, because I think if you're doing mini pupillages at the end of maybe your first year or your second year, for the sort of work we do, which is quite strongly contract and equity based, you're maybe not going to get the most out of it. I think equity is still taught in the third year at Cambridge and contract in the second year. So if you come to us at the end of the first year, a lot of what you see we're doing is not going to make an awful lot of sense to you unless you've done a lot of reading around subjects that you haven't yet studied. So you might not get much out of it. We might not see the best side of you. So it's worth timing your work experience, I think, so that both you get something out of it and you are able to impress those who you do it with.
Alia, you were going to say something. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, just to follow on and definitely agree with everything Greg has said. And I think it's really important to do work experience so that you are confident in the career that you've chosen. So I think it's good to have a wide array. When I was in my second year, I did 2 vacation schemes, one at Hogan Lovells, one at Whitening Case, and I also did some work experience in the civil service. And so by getting that direct comparison of what a different life could be, I was able to kind of feel more confident in my decision. So I think unless you're kind of dead set, like, oh, I've always wanted to be a lawyer, I would really encourage people to consider work experiences outside of the law, so that when you do arrive, you have full confidence in that decision. And following on from your when should you do it, like where do you look, Cambridge has such good resources for that. There's so many career fairs, there's always panels like this, people coming to speak, and I think the internet is always invaluable. And I think the key thing is to actually try and speak to people from the places where you're thinking about working. So really try and speak to members of staff there, because that really gives you the best insight.
And one thing that I'd like to add, sometimes the vacation schemes or sort of, mini internships that you do can be a bit glamorized with like lots of fun trips to Brussels at the end and stuff like that. One thing that I've found is that actually you can do internships that are not targeting the career, but the skills. Quite a few people, when they're applying to at least law firms to become solicitors, they tend to apply as if they were applying to become a partner. So I'd like to manage clients or do this and do that. And that's all very good, because that's what you will end up doing at some stage in your career. But really, there are some very important skills that you're applying, and you're trying to demonstrate that you have those: attention to detail, proofreading. So your internship experience doesn't necessarily have to be in the same field. I had friends who worked as editors, editing interns at some of the publishing houses and some of the editing sort of agencies. And the interviewers loved that, because that meant they wouldn't have to proofread at the end of the job, So there's that too.
If I may quickly as well, I think that first year isn't necessarily too early to start thinking about these kinds of things, where you're wanting to go after you graduate. I know that for those interested in becoming a solicitor, a lot of firms will offer kind of insight days or access days for either 1 or 2 days for first year students. And if you're at a point where you're not sure if corporate commercial law might be for you, I found attending one of those days pretty useful from someone who doesn't come from that kind of background, who has limited exposure to those types of organisations. It's a good way to kind of suss out if it might be something that you think you could fit into. And they also kind of give a bit of advice about applications for the following year for vacation schemes. So I think they're definitely worth having a look at. Keeping an eye out. They often come through the Law Society at Cambridge, similar organisations. So definitely something to consider.
Thanks. So we've got a good question coming here about virtual work experience as credible in-house experience, particularly with COVID interruptions. So where is the virtual fitting in now, I guess, in the kind of legal careers landscape?
I think I'd say in terms of work experience, it's definitely something that's here to stay, and it's definitely something that I think is incredibly beneficial for people, because even from Cambridge to London during term time, I was always nervous about, oh, do I have time to like take a couple of days like going into London, blah, blah. So if you can attend events virtually that are panels, or lots of solicitor firms are doing full open days or full vacation schemes online now, that can fit in a lot better around your personal circumstances. And you do lose, obviously, the going into the office and meeting people in person, but you can also gain a lot of the kind of background experience that you're still going to get. So people do a lot of kind of panels within firms, or they do a lot of conversations with partners and explaining how a deal works and things like that. So all of that information, actually gathering knowledge, is still there. I think the only difference really is it probably puts more onus on you to then follow up with the people that you're interested in, follow up in the departments that you think you'd be curious to look into more. But I definitely wouldn't say it's less beneficial, and I definitely do think it's something that we'll be moving towards from now on, and something that we should still really be trying to go for and get involved with. And it's also just very useful even so at the university level. I know that the Law Society and Cambridge Law as a faculty has been running a lot of virtual events. So yeah, I definitely think it's something that's a positive change, and we can really be utilising and thinking about moving forward.
That's great, thank you. So just moving on to a question that sort of hints on some of the things that have come up in the chat is, things like qualification. Now, obviously for solicitors, this is going to be changing. Anybody who's going to be starting, to study law as of this autumn is going to be asked to write the SQE, the solicitors qualifying exams, rather than going through the old route, which all of our solicitors, I assume, will have obviously gone through. So I guess to what extent, there's something we can sort of think about is, now that we're heading to this point where this formal academic requirement, the need to have a law degree or a qualifying law degree or or graduate diploma in law for solicitors is shifting away to just having a degree or equivalent experience and finishing the exams. I wonder if the solicitors can maybe make a case for still studying a law degree. So why should you still study it? And then if we can maybe then after that, if our barristers can maybe chime in about their qualification process, generally just give an overview of what it kind of looks like and how long it can take. Is it difficult? Or what, I guess, difficulties you found in your process of going through and qualifying. And solicitors can also kind of, I guess, touch on that too. It's just bearing in mind that it is going to be a different system for anybody who's coming through soon.
You should still study law because I had to open Virgo 2 weeks ago.
Do you want to maybe explain what you mean by that to people watching?
Yes, I don't even know. I don't even think I know what that means anymore.
So yeah, just for everybody to watch, Graham Virgo is one of the professors here at the law faculty. So very prolific, is also a co-author on a book that I think a lot of people have read when they apply to Cambridge. So he's a bit of an institution here.
But in all honesty, I mean, you have to read. When I qualified into restructuring and insolvency, that's not something that you necessarily do at your undergraduate degree, but it meant that I had to read a lot of cases, a lot of complicated legislation. And, you know, I'm sure you can do that not having done any formal legal education previously, but it certainly helped because I knew where to look. I knew that if someone was going to quiz me on what could go wrong, I just had to go to paragraph 73 of a judgment to see what would have happened had it been a different case. And I think those skills are so valuable for any career. It's just critical thinking and reasoning.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, I think in general, research skill, I think is usually an advantage for people that study law. Say that, I think this is just at the beginning, because of course, from a solicitor perspective, throughout the training contract, you will develop that very quickly. However, being able to know how to use Westlaw or reading a case, I think those, especially when you do a litigation seat, which is often the case in the first seat, really give, I guess, a good advantage. But on the other end, I think like a good thing as well is to explore different area of law, because I guess when you start a training contract, you have to choose a different seat. And if you already study, you know, if you've done a corporate module or I don't know, another one, commercial, etc., it would be good to have an understanding so that you can choose the seat that you would like. But I say that, I think now it's split 50-50, especially in the training contract. So I think, I mean, I'm a strong supporter because I went through 3 degrees of law, but in general, I think is, I mean, depending if you really like and you want to explore, a law degree is great. But nowadays, I think it doesn't really give you that big advantage, especially when you apply for training contract now.
Very good to have two different opinions there for everybody to take into account. Thank you. Do any of our other solicitors want to weigh on their qualifications and that kind of process and their thoughts?
Yeah, I can, because I didn't do a law degree, so I converted my degree. And I'm of the opinion that it's actually really good to have another degree, not a law degree, and being a lawyer, because I think kind of the advantages of that is you can offer a really different perspective than some of your colleagues. And I know for solicitors, usually for firms, it's kind of a 50-50 split of those who did law and those who didn't. And I think kind of HSPS was a really good basis because you kind of get those research skills, but then you also maybe get more like of a well-rounded geopolitical influence in your law. So I think there's like a case for both. And how it works is you do the GDL, and I think this is all subject to change though with the SQE, but I did the GDL, which is a year conversion where you kind of do the 7 core law modules in a year. It's kind of like a crash course. And then I did the LPC, which is the legal professional course, which is what solicitors do.
Yeah, thanks for that. I do just want to stress, because we've had questions coming in about law degrees. One thing to kind of emphasize about the law degree here at Cambridge is that it is predominantly an academic course. Yes, it's something that you can use to then qualify as a lawyer, but there is, and the way the course is set up, and there is a kind of, fundamental benefit or idea of the subject as an academic area of study. And certainly we do have students who don't want to become lawyers, but do want to study law, because the idea of what the law is and how to think like a lawyer and the types of questions you grapple with attract them. Whereas maybe the day-to-day of what, you know, a solicitor or a barrister does is less what they're interested in. So just to kind of throw it out there for anybody who's also sort of thinking, well, if this is the route I want to go down, but what if I'm actually interested in law, but I don't want to go that, I just thought I should raise that. But if our barristers can maybe talk about qualifications, the general process, challenges, how long it takes. We've had a few questions come in along that. So if you guys don't mind speaking to that in kind of general terms.
Sure, I'll have a go, and then Greg can fill in the gaps or correct me where I've gone wrong. Greg and I obviously went through this some time ago, and there have been a few changes afoot since we both went through it. I've just dug out from the Bar Standards Board website a helpful kind of guide to how you become a barrister. And so I'll copy and paste the link into the chat in just a moment when I've finished answering this, so that if anyone's wants to look at it in more detail, then they can just click on that and have a look through. But in very broad terms, it goes something like this. The academic part of bar training requires you to have either an undergraduate law degree or the law conversion course that Alia was talking about, which takes a year, and you do that if you did a non-law undergraduate degree. So you complete that, and then you have the vocational part of your training, which is a one-year course now known as the Bar Training Course, the BTC. And there are various modules studied on the BTC that try and help you make that transition from being an academic lawyer to a practicing practical lawyer. So you look at more detail in things like research skills, negotiation skills, procedural law, that kind of thing, most of which is not studied as part of an academic law degree. That takes a year. There are various providers around the country that run the BTC. And again, the details of that will be on the web link that I've found. Once you've done your BTC, you then need to do a year of pupillage at a set of chambers. Pupillage varies quite a lot from chambers to chambers, but in our area of the bar, usually what happens is you will spend the full 12 months of your pupillage effectively shadowing and learning from your pupil supervisors. So you don't practice as a barrister usually in our area of the bar for your pupillage year. You just do work set for you by your supervisor and follow your supervisor around. So you see them in court hearings, in conferences, that sort of thing. And you effectively learn on the job for that year, which is also an assessment period. So at the end of the year, chambers will decide whether or not you've met the standard to become a permanent member of chambers. And if so, then you take your practice forward from there. And if not, you either look for a further period of pupillage at another set of chambers, or people go off and do all sorts of other things if they don't actually end up being taken on.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. That covers everything that I can think of.
Great. Well, thank you for providing such a comprehensive and easily understandable answer. Much appreciated. I think one thing that's kind of come up, somebody in the comments asked about work-life balance, which I think also just raises a general idea of what does your day-to-day look like? If that's even a thing. I mean, obviously I understand that some people are in places where things change so frequently. But if people maybe talk about what their average day looks like, both at work, but also maybe talk about, you know, what hobbies or things have you made time for outside of busy careers?
Yeah, I can start on that one. So I'm currently a third seat trainee. So a training contract tends to be split into either 4 groups of 6 months. Each 6 months is called a seat, and you do 4 seats over 2 years in different departments across the firm. I'm currently in our corporate practice, specifically with the financial institutions group. So we do all the corporate work for financial institutions, so things like insurers or banks and people like that. So for instance, this is incredibly cliche, but no 2 days are ever the same, which is something I was really attracted to when I was thinking about being a solicitor. I like the fact that there is a lot of variety in the work you do, and it's very different depending on what comes in and client deadlines and things that happen you weren't expecting to happen. So for instance, yesterday, a senior associate and I are working on draft documents for a big transaction we're doing at the moment. So she was marking them up, and then she'd send them to me with comments to be like, input this sort of clause, we need wording to do this sort of thing. I'd then go away, try and look up the correct wording from precedent documents that we have, which are other transactions in the same sort of field, and then molding that language to fit what we're trying to do here, which put the sort of work I find really interesting, because I like working with language, I like working with words, and it's interesting to see how things change depending on the client and what you're trying to achieve. So I did that for a few hours. I did some research on another matter for a different senior associate, which was research into how a company can transfer assets out of their company to another company within the same group and the limitations around that. I had a meeting with my mentee, so I'm a mentor for Social Mobility Foundation, so I had a meeting with him. I tried to do all of this in time to go watch the football with some friends. So that was yesterday. Today is looking very different. So it always just kind of depends and varies. But yeah, that's kind of a typical sort of thing. And then, yeah, especially being back in London now with things opening a bit, I'm trying to make time just to see my friends as much as possible. I love going to like galleries, museums. I'm not from London, so all the touristy things as well. So yeah.
I've had quite a busy year just because of economic conditions and being a restructuring and insolvency lawyer. So I tend to wake up pretty early. So I start work at around 8:30. But the great thing about having a dynamic restructuring career is that you have periods of time where you're absolutely shattered, and then you'll have a month of nothing. So you just wake up, do nothing, go to bed, which is great. Having said that, I definitely have hobbies on the side. I'm actually taking my LTCL in piano performance, which is like this sort of master's equivalent, just the performance. I'll probably fail, but whatever. And I actually have quite a few hobbies with the team, which is one of the nice parts of being employed, where you have like a really good team. We go to drinks every week, pretty much, socially distanced and adhering to rules. Don't sue us. And we also do a yearly ski trip, which we call Insolvent Ski. So that's a lot of fun. So there's a lot to do. I mean, it's not, even when you're busy, it can be a lot of fun because you've got to have coffee at some point, right?
Thanks, Michael. Does anybody else want to share? Maybe one of our barristers.
The work-life balance, I think, is always quite an interesting point to chat about, because certainly my experience is that not everybody shares the same idea of what a good work-life balance is. For some people, the ideal work-life balance is the one where their life fits around the spare moments when they're not working, and for them, you know, that's the way they want to live their lives, both sides of their lives. I've never been of that persuasion. I've always wanted to maintain what I think is a healthy work-life balance, with a view to working in such a way that enables me to live outside work. All barristers are self-employed, which somebody perceptively explained to me when I first started means the freedom to work at weekends and bank holidays. But it does more seriously mean that when you start, you're trying to build a practice for yourself, and it can mean that you end up devoting yourself quite heavily to your work, and it can mean that you can get lost in that devotion, I think, and end up just taking every piece of work that's going because you're petrified to turn something down, and your life outside work can suffer for it. I think that's a mistake. Certainly by the time families come along, if you haven't got yourself into a habit or haven't acquired the skill of balancing your life and your work, you're going to find family life both, I suspect, taxing and unsatisfying. But having said that, I'm sure people who like to work as hard as they possibly can wouldn't say that about the balance they have. I mean, I've been lucky enough to do plenty of things outside work over the years. I lack any sort of musical or dramatic talent, but most of the stuff I do is exercise. So in my late 40s, I decided pretty much from a standing start to do an Ironman, and I was able to fit the volume of hours a week required to train for that, which is substantial, around the work I was doing. And it was great. Now I've carried on doing that for a few years afterwards before ultimately injuries and for just general wear and tear got the better of me. But if you, as I say, it's where your balance lies is deeply personal, but it's important that you find it and you adhere to what works for you.
I was just going to add to that. This isn't sort of direct answer to the question, but the point Greg makes about us being self-employed is one that I think sometimes escapes people. That they're generally aware of solicitors, the structure of a solicitor's firm, and you're an employee of the firm, whereas we run things a bit differently. That is something that's worth bearing in mind when you're choosing your career path, because it's right to acknowledge, I think, that it doesn't suit everybody, but it suits some people very well. But you do need to have a think about it before you leap down a particular road, because it does mean that we have there are some real differences, and obviously with the freedom to work as much or as little as you like come a number of responsibilities, and as I say, it isn't for everybody, so just bear that in mind when thinking about which way to go.
Yeah, that's excellent points, and I think Greg's comments about work-life balance and the fact that it's very personally defined, I think is very astute, and something to bear in mind. What works for you as an individual will be completely different from the person beside you. So thank you for highlighting that. I guess maybe let's look at this question, but maybe revisit it within your student days, which is a question that we actually get asked a lot, and by the sounds of it, something that you also have to grapple with as practicing lawyers. But that balancing between your studies and enjoying everything that Cambridge has to offer. What was that experience like? What did you prioritize? What did you struggle with? And I mean, by the sounds of it, in many cases, these are obviously skills that you brought forward into your legal profession. So if you want to maybe speak about how something has kind of led to that, that would be wonderful.
Hi, I think the whole extracurricular concept is a great way of getting used to balancing work and things outside of work. When I was at Cambridge, I tried to throw myself into the various things that were on offer, had to go at rowing, had to go at mixed lacrosse, joining various societies, that kind of stuff. And particularly something that, like rowing, that's pretty intense if you're doing it to a decent college level. It's good to get used to time management, and it's a great skill to put on applications when you're applying for jobs, to be able to show that you've done some sport to a decent level and fit in your studies as well. I think it's a great thing to do, and it's fun. I mean, it's nice to get involved with team sports in particular, to meet new people from different colleges. It's easy to get stuck in your own college or with people doing the same subject. So it's a great way of meeting new people, having fun, staying fit. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I think on that point, I think in Cambridge, I perhaps didn't take the right approach. I would work in the day and then I'd go out every night, and it was very exhausting. And I don't think I could sustain that now. I feel old. But I think what Cambridge really did teach me, and what a lot of friends in Cambridge taught me, was that you're not only being productive when you're doing academic work or when you're doing work that's like perhaps legal work, like now in my job, like it's productive also to rest and to see friends and to have a balance. So I think there's always this pressure, especially at a place like Cambridge, where you think you need to be working all the time, and like that's the best form of productivity. But I think something that you will kind of learn when you're there is that actually you have to fill other pots in your life as well to kind of get the maximum out of it.
Yeah, just to add to that, like I totally agree with everything that's been said. Like I think having that sort of understanding that you cannot work all the time and it's not efficient or productive to do so is really important. And also from the perspective that I definitely do believe that having other things in your day besides the lecture and the supervision that you have, or other things you're planning your time around, will definitely make you more efficient. And it's definitely something that I think is a skill you develop. But having other things that you need to take responsibility for, other things that take up your time, will make you work more efficiently. It will make you work in a more concentrated manner. And those are sorts of skills that you'll definitely take forward when you start working as well. So I was really involved in the judo team. I was president of the judo team at Cambridge, and I was also vice president of the Law Society. So like lots of extracurriculars, lots of meetings and events and planning. Any sort of committee that you're interested in does not have to be subject related, law related, anything, because it's the same idea that these skills will carry you forward. So I spent a good 20 minutes in my CC, like my Clifford Chance training contract interview, talking about running the law ball and talking about how awful Tinty Strider's manager is. Not a fun guy, and he wouldn't confirm anything. So like, but those sorts of organizational skills, right, are like, and how you manage people and expectations, all things you're going to take forward. So getting involved in anything like that that interests you, would highly recommend. And there's something for everyone at Cambridge. Wait till you go to the careers fair or the societies fair. There's 1,000 different things you can do.
I endorse everything that's been said by Chiara, Alia, and Rachel. I'm going to put this slightly differently. I think if you go to university, whether it's Cambridge or anywhere else, and spend 3 years working, you have wasted perhaps the best 3 years of your life. There are so many things to do when you're at university, so many friendships you can form that will stand you in good stead for the rest of your life, that if you don't take advantage of it, you have, I think, really missed the point of going there in the first place.
Absolutely. It's a great point. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
I think for me, maybe my experience was a bit different because I was in Cambridge only for 1 year doing an LLM, but I remember to try to do as much as possible. I feel like organization skill are key. And when it came to the training contract, now working in a transactional department, I think organization become key to ensure to maximize your experience, ensure that you're on top of everything. And of course, you know, the whole attitude of like play hard, work hard, I think it's appealing, especially when you're a student. But you know, when you start working as a trainee or in a transaction seat especially, it's important to be on top of everything. And especially when you're lack of sleep, those become key. So I think like it's even good when you're a student to try to build up there to make sure that you are on top of your study, but at the same time you do all the extracurricular activity needed or applying for jobs, etc.
Yeah, that's great. This is a question that's sort of building on what's come up in the chat, but I think it's an important one to kind of flag, because we do have people who are looking at coming to Cambridge to do law because they hope to practice law in the UK, but they're not necessarily from the UK themselves. So, and obviously I understand that our current circumstances with leaving the European Union are probably complicating this, particularly when we used to have quite a few EU citizens who were then taking trainee contracts, and it was probably a easier bureaucratic fashion to do so. So just wondering if anybody knows or could speak to the ability for international overseas individuals to go through a law program and getting trainee contracts or pupilages, what challenges they might face, if anybody can speak to that. I'm aware that not everybody may be able to, but I figured it's a good question to ask.
Two of our junior tenants from, I think they did their pupilages 3 years ago now, I think, both Australian. They both did their first undergraduate degrees in Australia and then worked a bit over here. I think they were both doing postgraduate work, one at Oxford, one at Cambridge. The main difficulty that presented for us as a prospective pupillage offerer was making sure they had their visa status sorted out. But otherwise, we're just interested in what their perceived abilities were, and they were excellent. So that's my rather limited contribution to this. Yeah,
understandable. Like I said, I'm aware that it's a perspective that may not be there, but we did have it, and certainly by someone who also has an accent that clearly defines you as someone who's away, who's come to the UK from other places. It's useful to flag that. Oh, Michael, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if it helps.
Please.
So I was actually EU, so it was an easier process for me. But having friends who did qualify, one of the things that people watching this might not know is that actually the firms really, really, really support your applications. So I think their visa costs were taken care of. They were flown. If they had to apply, one of my friends had to apply for a visa from Singapore while she was doing her training. She was flown to Singapore so that she could make the application and then back. So there is a lot of support. It shouldn't be a bar to anyone, in my opinion, at least. And, you know, if you're worried about it at all, the first time I ever stepped foot in the UK was for my Cambridge interview. It worked out. So yeah, there will be help along the way.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate that. As we've still got 10 minutes left, so I think I've got a couple questions left that I think would be good to answer before we wrap up. So one, I know that we've talked about things like the qualification process, we've talked about various other sorts of things like the day-to-day, but maybe something we haven't talked about is like, what do you enjoy the most about your jobs? What do you like the most? What is the thing that gets you up every morning and says, yeah, I'm still doing this today?
Okay, I'll go first because I really, really love restructuring and insolvency. And I know that sounds super geeky, but when I was doing my TC, just as a reminder, I studied English and law at Cambridge, so I switched tripos. And I'm sort of that kind of person that I can never decide what I like. I always like to do, you know, a bit of music here, not a lot of sport, but I like varied things. When I started doing my TC, I was going through my seats thinking, I like 90% of this seat, but not 100%. And then I got into restructuring. And with restructuring and insolvency work, there's so much varied work that you do because every single transaction will flag different things that you have to take into account. So whether it's dealing with a health company in the UAE that's been subject to a 6 billion fraud, and you need to learn how MRIs get moved from one hospital to another, or whether you're working on a commodities insolvency where the company is dumping sort of lethal products off the coast of Australia, you've got to figure out what you do about that. It's just so varied with different areas of law too. And I think that's why I get up in the morning. Also my alarm.
Yeah, the alarm helps. I think I was just thinking about this as Michael was speaking. For me, I think I could probably boil it down to 3 elements. Problem solving. All cases start with a problem that you have to fundamentally unravel and solve. And I've always enjoyed problem solving. Helping other people. It's one of those things that oddly, because I never really think of myself as a person helper, but actually it is something that I really enjoy. And then the third one is getting my own way, which is the sort of thumbnail sketch of advocacy. It's persuading somebody else to do something that they may be innately opposed to doing, but you want them to do it. And ultimately, if you do get your own way and persuade them, it's immensely satisfying.
I think for me, it's definitely the people I work with. I think that's like what I enjoy most about my job is my colleagues and how much fun it is to work together, but also how willing and how good everyone is at teaching. Like, especially at junior in your career, you really do rely on kind of seniors to show you the way, and they do it so well. And I always say lawyers are really great teachers, and I really think that's true. And I think, yeah, that's why I enjoy coming to work, because even though work is in my bedroom, it's because I just actually really enjoy chatting to my colleagues and kind of getting to pick their brains.
Rachel, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, similarly to that, I think for me, when I was looking at all the different, like I knew I always wanted to work in law, but I didn't really know what area. I didn't know if I wanted to be solicitor or barrister, keep researching. I really didn't know, so I did a bit of everything. But for me, it was always that I wanted a job where I was always learning. Like I never wanted to be bored. I never wanted to be the point where like, I know everything about this and there's nothing new to learn. And I think in any aspect that you work in law or take the skills forward that you learn from a law degree, you won't be in that situation. So for me, it's always that I could learn something new today. I could do something completely different. I could research something I've never heard of before. And hopefully by the end of today, know a lot more than when I started. So yeah.
Does anybody else would like to chime in? All right. Well, we can move on to a different question then. So I guess you know what you'd like. You've all been in touch with Cambridge in some way, shape, or form, and the law. So you can speak to about your experiences doing law at Cambridge or what you were studying at Cambridge, but and also your legal careers in general. But like, what advice would you give your younger self who's about to embark on this journey? Either, you know, it's applying to Cambridge or thinking about the law. Could be either, but what are those little bits of advice that you're like, I wish I could go back in time and tell myself this because I think it would have made my life easier or better or whatever?
If I may. First thing is choose a degree subject that you think you're going to be good at and you think you're going to enjoy. Those are the two paramount considerations in my view to choosing your degree subject. After that, if you want to become a lawyer, be certain that you want to become a lawyer. Actually, by which I mean, see what it looks like being a lawyer. Don't become a lawyer because you think it sounds like a good thing to do, or because you think it sounds like an impressive thing to do, or because you've seen some television dramas in which lawyers are portrayed. Practice is nothing like what you see on television or films. Get under the skin of what you want to do and make sure that that's what you actually want to do. Other things would be, as we've covered earlier, once you're at university, make sure you experience the full range of things on offer at university. And the other thing I'd say to my younger self is keep your eyes skinned, because in your first year, you're going to meet your future wife. So make sure you know which one it is and don't pass her up.
I was going to offer a little bit of advice about I suppose, how you approach your studies to some extent at university. So something that I think happened to me accidentally was I got a little bit focused on just making sure that I studied in such a way as would help me sort of do well in my exams. And I think I sometimes forgot to think more broadly about the skills that I was learning. And I rather regretted that later. And I think probably it would have stood me in good stead to reflect on that a little bit more at the time. So instead of just focusing on ticking off the exam work, just have a think about the sort of analytical skills that you're developing. It's those kind of things that you'll get asked about at job interviews, and it's those kind of things that really matter in practice. And if you develop a technique of a bit of self-awareness and self-reflection on what it is you're learning about and how you're doing that process, I think that can really help you in becoming a sort of more successful practicing lawyer as you go forwards.
So I would want to add, and maybe this is more relevant for someone that is not from England, because I'm from Italy, and definitely one thing which I guess I realized by working and living here now is that probably like as a teenager, my best advice is don't be too stuck with a particular like career path or a path that will lead you to what you want to do. Because especially like in Italy, if you want to do law, you need to study law, and it's quite hard to then change career. Well, the good things about England, as we mentioned before, is that you can do another degree and then, convert, or you can just, do law, but then go for something else. So it's always good to keep an open mind about what you want to do, especially when you are an high school student before you go and choose your degree or the different like area that you want to, develop interest while you are at uni. think that's things that keeping this open mind is very good, especially also when you become, I don't know, if you go for the solicitor route as a trainee or upon qualifications, there is so much opportunity, so many different options you can undertake.
Would anybody like to have the last word before we wrap things up?
Yes, thank you. I think one thing that I would tell myself going back would be to worry a lot less about the result. And I think that's something that everyone's been saying. And it's because at the end of the day, I mean, if you go through the process and you're learning a lot, there are plenty of 2-1 students who get a first and first class students who get a 2-1 and people who get in and who don't get in and who go somewhere else. And it doesn't really make a difference if you're interested in what you're doing and you're inquisitive about it and self-reflexive and asking questions and trying to learn more. And I think those are the things that always benefited me in life. And the times when I always set myself back is when I was so razor focused on a particular outcome that looking back on it, it didn't really matter.
Well, I think that is some very sage words and advice to wrap us up on. So before everybody goes, first off, there's been a lot of questions that have come in during the chat that are more relevant towards law admissions. So if we haven't answered those questions, that's why. But if you'd like to ask them, please join us on Friday. There'll be a subject-specific web Q&A format as part of the open days. If you need more information about that, please go to the university's undergraduate study webpage. Look under open days, look at the program events, and please register for it then. We'll also have a Slido chat if anybody can't make it tomorrow at a different time, that you can definitely ask those questions there. So please do that. I'd like to also just take the opportunity to thank all of our panelists for stepping out of very busy days and being willing to kind of share their perspective and their experiences and their opinions on their careers. I hope this has been informative for everybody else. And once again, would like to acknowledge the fact that Hogan Lovells, Freshfields, Clifford Chance, and Maitland Chambers are all, I believe I've got everybody there. Yes, I did. Did I accidentally miss anybody? No, okay, good. That'd be awful, sorry. I just want to say that they are our access and widening participation firms. So they generously support our outreach programs here in Faculty Law, for which we're very grateful. So we're incredibly grateful as well that you're willing to dedicate some of your time to helping us out with things. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you.